The answer is no one knows, and that's the worst part of the story. For over 60 years, the question has hung in the cold Chicago air. Who killed Barbara and Patricia Grimes? The mystery starts with something simple, something a million kids have done. They wanted to see a movie. It was December 28th, 1956. A Friday night, the air in Chicago had a bite to it. Barbara Grimes was 15. She was a freshman at Thomas Kelly High School. She was responsible, the kind of older sister you could trust. Patricia was 13, a 7th grader at St. Maurice Elementary. They were good kids. They lived with their mother, Loretta Grimes, and their 4 younger siblings in a small apartment on the southwest side. Their father had left years ago. Loretta worked hard as a clerk to keep the family afloat. Money was tight. A trip to the movies was a big deal. Elvis Presley was the biggest thing in the world. His first movie, Love Me Tender, had just come out. Barbara and Patricia were obsessed. They had already seen it more than 10 times. They begged their mother to let them go see it one more time at the Brighton Theater, about a mile and a half from their home. Loretta was hesitant. It was a school night and they had chores, but they pleaded. They promised they'd be back right after the first showing. She gave in. She gave them $2.50. Enough for their tickets, some popcorn, and the bus fare home. She told them to be home by midnight at the latest. It was the last time she saw them alive. The girls left home around 7:30 p.m. when they got to the theater and met a friend from school, Dorothy Weinert. Dorothy sat with them through the first showing of the movie. She left around 9:30 p.m. The Grimes sisters stayed. They wanted to watch it again. The concession stand worker, a woman named Marie D'Amico, remembered seeing them. She said they looked happy, laughing, and buying popcorn before the second show. That was around 11 p.m. After that, they vanished. Midnight came and went. Loretta Grimes started to worry. This wasn't like them. Barbara was reliable. She would have called if they were going to be late. By 2 a.m., Loretta was in a full-blown panic. She called the police. The police at the 22nd District Station weren't very concerned. 2 teenage girls out late on a Friday night. They probably just went to a friend's house, they said. Maybe they were at a party. They told her to wait until morning, but a mother knows. Loretta knew something was wrong. The next morning, the girls were still gone. Now, the police started to take it seriously. A massive search began. It was one of the biggest missing persons investigations in Chicago's history. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers fanned out across the city. They searched parks, abandoned buildings, and the drainage canal. They dragged the waterways. Nothing. Their faces were everywhere. On posters taped to lampposts, on the front pages of newspapers, on the evening news. Have you seen these girls? The city was on edge. Everyone was talking about the Grimes sisters. The theories started almost immediately. The first and most popular one was that they had run away. They were Elvis fanatics. Maybe they had taken a bus to Nashville to meet him. Or maybe they were headed to Memphis, to Graceland. It seemed plausible. Teenage girls did things like that. Their friends told police the girls had talked about wanting to go to Hollywood to become stars. This theory gave people a sense of hope. It was better than the alternative. The Chicago Daily News even ran a story with the headline, "Are Elvis's songs a lure to runaways?" This idea got so big that it reached Elvis himself. On January 10th, from his home in Memphis, Elvis made a public plea. He spoke into a radio microphone, his voice filled with concern. "If you are good Presley fans," he said, "you'll go home and ease your mother's worries." It was a kind gesture from a global superstar, but it didn't bring them home. Loretta Grimes never believed it. She knew her daughters. They wouldn't just leave without a word. They wouldn't abandon their family. She was certain they had been taken. As the days turned into weeks, the hope began to fade. The Chicago winter deepened. Snow fell, covering the city in a thick white blanket. The search continued, but with less and less optimism. Strange sightings were reported. Someone thought they saw the girls at a diner. Someone else saw them get into a car. A bus driver claimed he saw them looking disoriented. None of the leads went anywhere. The family received crank calls and cruel letters. Psychics offered their visions. The city held its breath. Then, on January 22nd, 1957, almost a month after they disappeared, the waiting ended. A man named Leonard Prescott was driving down a quiet, deserted road in a forest preserve near Willow Springs, a suburb southwest of Chicago. He was a part-time construction worker. He pulled over to the side of the road to relieve himself. He walked a few feet into the snowy woods, and then he saw them. The bodies of Barbara and Patricia Grimes were lying side by side in the dirty snow behind a guardrail. They were naked. Patricia was lying on her back, her arms over her head. Barbara was lying on her left side, her body covering Patricia's face. The snow had melted and refrozen around them, encasing them in a thin layer of ice. There were no clothes, no purses, no identification, just two young girls frozen and abandoned. The discovery shifted the case from a search into a murder investigation. The Cook County coroner, Walter McCarran, arrived at the scene. He conducted a preliminary examination right there on the frozen ground. What he concluded would throw the entire case into a state of confusion that lasts to this day. McCarran's initial report was baffling. He said there were no obvious signs of violence on the bodies. No gunshot wounds, no stab wounds, no signs of strangulation. He noticed some small marks on Barbara's body, like scratches from an animal, but he dismissed them as insignificant. And his official cause of death was secondary shock due to exposure to the cold. He believed the girls had been alive for more than a week after they disappeared. He estimated they had died sometime between January 7th and January 9th. This meant that for 10 or 12 days, someone had kept them alive somewhere. He also noted that the autopsy revealed undigested food in their stomachs, which he identified as looking like the pinkish kind of ice cream sold at the movie theater. This seemed to support the idea that they were taken right after the movie. But the timeline made no sense. If they died from exposure, where were they for all those days? And why were they naked? McCarran's report suggested a scenario where the girls ran away, got caught in the cold, and froze to death. It didn't feel right. The public and the police were skeptical. The lead investigator, Chief of Detectives James Lynch, publicly disagreed with the coroner. He was convinced it was a double homicide. The idea that two girls could be held for a week and then dumped naked by the side of the road without foul play seemed absurd. The pressure mounted. The case was now a national sensation, a parent's worst nightmare come to life. The Cook County State's Attorney, Benjamin Adamowski, ordered a second, more thorough examination. He brought in a team of the country's top forensic pathologists. These men were experts. Their findings were completely different from McCarran's. They found evidence of violence. They determined that Barbara had numerous puncture wounds on her chest, possibly made with an ice pick. Both girls had bruises and other injuries. The experts concluded that the girls had been murdered, and they hadn't been alive for a week. They believed the girls died within hours of their last sighting on December 28th. The undigested food in their stomachs proved it. Food digests in a few hours. This meant the coroner's timeline was impossible. The official cause of death was changed to murder. This conflict between the two autopsies created chaos. It meant the police had been working with the wrong timeline for weeks. If the girls were killed on the 28th, then any sightings of them after that date were false. The entire investigation had to be rebooted, but the damage was done. The first few days of a murder investigation are the most critical. That time had been lost spent chasing runaway theories and false leads. With the case now officially a homicide, the police needed a suspect, and they found one quickly. His name was Bennie Bedwell. He was a 21-year-old drifter from Tennessee. He worked as a dishwasher and had a minor criminal record. He also bore a striking resemblance to Elvis Presley, a detail the newspapers latched onto. Police picked him up for questioning. At first, Bedwell denied everything, but after days of intense interrogation, he broke. He confessed. His story was rambling and inconsistent. He said he and another man, a friend he only knew as Frank, met the Grimes sisters outside the Brighton Theater. He said the girls willingly got into their car. They drove around for a few days drinking and partying. He claimed they went to several bars and motels. He said the girls were alive and well when he last saw them. He just dropped them off on the street and drove away. This first confession fit with Coroner McCarran's initial theory that the girls had been alive for days after they vanished. But it didn't explain how they ended up dead and naked in the snow. The police didn't believe him. They kept pressing him. They questioned him for hours on end without a lawyer present. Finally, Bedwell changed his story. He confessed to killing them. He said he and Frank had beaten the girls to death, but he couldn't remember where they did it. He couldn't lead police to the murder scene. He couldn't remember key details. He signed the confession, but it was full of holes. The police announced they had solved the case. The headline screamed, "Drifter confesses to Grimes slayings." But the case against Bennie Bedwell fell apart almost as quickly as it came together. As soon as he was given a lawyer, Bedwell recanted his confession. He claimed the police had beaten it out of him. He said they deprived him of food and sleep and promised him leniency if he just told them what they wanted to hear. He said he was innocent, and there was no physical evidence to link him to the crime. Nothing. His fingerprints weren't found at the scene. No one could place him with the girls. The man he named as his accomplice, Frank, was never found. He may not have even existed. The charges against Bennie Bedwell were eventually dropped. He was released and faded back into obscurity, forever linked to a crime he likely didn't commit. He died in 1993, a haunted man. With Bedwell cleared, the investigation was back to square one. The police were desperate. They looked at other suspects. There was Edward Buzzy Bedwell, Bennie's older brother. He owned a diner near the theater where some people claimed to have seen the girl. He was questioned, but had a solid alibi. There was a 17-year-old boy named Max Flagg who called the police with a strange tip. He said he had a dream, a vision of two girls lying in a ditch. His description of the location was eerily similar to where the bodies were found. He was brought in for questioning and failed a lie detector test, but like with Bedwell, there was no evidence. Was he a psychic, a disturbed teenager, or a killer playing games? No one could say for sure. Over the years, dozens of other men were considered suspects. A factory worker whose wife claimed he came home with bloody clothes. A local sex offender. A man who was seen trying to pick up teenage girls near the theater. Each lead was a dead end. The case file grew thicker and thicker, filled with interviews, tips, and theories, but no answers. Loretta Grimes passed away in 1989, never knowing who killed her daughters. The remaining Grimes siblings grew up under the shadow of the tragedy. Decades passed. The case went cold. But some people never gave up. One of them was a retired West Chicago police detective named Ray Johnson. He became obsessed with the case in his retirement. He spent years digging through the old files, re-interviewing witnesses, and chasing down old leads. He came to believe that the real killer was a man named Charles Melquist. Melquist was a monster. He was a convicted killer who had murdered a 23-year-old woman named Bonnie Lee Scott in 1958, just over a year after the Grimes sisters were killed. The details of that murder were chillingly similar. He had picked her up, sexually assaulted her, killed her, and dumped her naked body in a wooded area. And Melquist lived in the Chicago area in 1956. He frequented the same neighborhoods as the Grimes sisters. He fit the profile of a sexual predator. Even more compelling was his physical appearance. Johnson found an old photograph of Charles Melquist from the 1950s. He looked almost identical to Bennie Bedwell. They could have been brothers. Johnson theorized that the witnesses who claimed to have seen the girls with a young man who looked like the Elvis were not lying. They had seen them with someone. But it wasn't Bennie Bedwell, it was Charles Melquist. Johnson built a strong circumstantial case against Melquist. He believed Melquist abducted the girls from the theater, possibly with an accomplice. He killed them that same night, and kept their bodies for several weeks, maybe in a freezer or an unheated garage, before dumping them by the side of the road when he thought the coast was clear. This would explain the frozen state of the bodies and the conflicting autopsy reports. The bodies could have been preserved, making the time of death difficult to determine. It's the most plausible theory to emerge from the case. It connects the dots. It explains the Elvis look-alike sightings. It fits the profile of a known violent criminal. But it's just a theory. Charles Melquist was never charged with the Grimes murders. He was convicted for the murder of Bonnie Lee Scott and spent the rest of his life in prison. He died in 2010, taking any secrets he had to the grave. We can't ask him. We can't prove it. There is no DNA evidence from that time. The trail is too cold, so who killed the Grimes sisters? Was it Bennie Bedwell who confessed under duress? Was it a psychic teenager named Max Flagg? Or was it the convicted murderer Charles Melquist, a man who looked like the prime suspect and killed in a similar way? The truth is, we are left with nothing but shadows and speculation. The story of Barbara and Patricia Grimes is more than just an unsolved crime. It's a story about the loss of innocence. Not just for the two girls, but for an entire city, an entire generation of parents. It was a moment when people realized that the world was not as safe as they thought. A night at the movies, a simple pleasure, could end in unimaginable horror. The police investigation was flawed from the start. The focus on the runaway theory wasted precious time. The conflicting autopsies created a cloud of confusion that never lifted. The forced confession from Bennie Bedwell was a desperate act by a police force under immense pressure to close the case. It was a perfect storm of mistakes and bad luck. Today, all that remains are old newspaper clippings, grainy black and white photos, and the lingering sadness of a crime that never found justice. The Brighton Theater is long gone. The quiet road in Willow Springs has changed. But the story endures. It's a ghost story whispered in the Chicago wind. A cautionary tale about two sisters who went to see an Elvis movie and never came home. They were found together, frozen in the snow, and the person who put them there got away with it. And that is the simple, brutal, and unresolved truth. We will probably never know for sure.